Do you remember what it was like in the 1970s? As the cost of living skyrocketed, fresh meat became a luxury, and food storage became a priority for every family. Just open your grandparents' kitchen cabinets, and you'll find boxes of creamy Lucky Charms cereal, convenient cans of Vienna sausages, and frozen TV dinners. These simple foods were the survival weapons that helped them get by during the turbulent economy. Today, discover 25 thrifty grocery items that fed a generation. Lucky Charms wasn't just cereal, it was Grandma's sweetest treat of the 70s, helping keep children from complaining about a meager breakfast. You might recall the thrill of seeing that 11-ounce box on the shelf, seeing it as a sugary highlight among otherwise bland meals. A box of Lucky Charms back then cost 59 to 79 cents, equivalent to about $4.50 to $6 today. To make the most of this gift, your grandma often mixed it with watery powdered milk at a ratio of 1 part powder to 4 parts water, aiming to save real fresh milk or use it for other necessities. This combination, although it made the cereal soggy quickly, was still a filling breakfast that could last 3 to 4 days at a very low cost. Sometimes, children were given a small plastic bag of the cereal to take to school as a prized snack, and it made them feel like they were eating dessert, not just ordinary breakfast. Lucky Charms was even used to make marshmallow crunch bars by melting sugar with cheap margarine and mixing it with the cereal, pressing it into sweet bars for the whole week. In the 1970s pantry, peanut butter was an essential, indispensable item, and major brands like Kraft were still present, even if they cost slightly more than the no-name generic kind. Buying branded peanut butter, which cost about 20 cents more than the generic type, was a priority for your grandparents to ensure a better quality, plant-based protein source to combat the scarcity of expensive meat. An 18-ounce jar of a name brand like Kraft usually cost 69 to 89 cents then, a price point we pay many times over today. The reason peanut butter was so popular was that it was incredibly cheap and could last 6 to 12 months without refrigeration, making it a firm, protective wall in the cupboard. Our grandparents were creative, turning it into nutrient-boosting meals for breakfast, such as adding a spoonful of peanut butter to oatmeal to increase protein and fat, making the meal last longer. The classic sandwich back then was often white bread, spread with peanut butter, and sprinkled with sugar to mask the bland taste, turning it into a beloved school snack. Back then, schools also paired celery with peanut butter as a simple and effective protein snack for students. Today, we have countless premium nut butters, but for our grandparents' generation, peanut butter was the simplest and most effective nutritional lifeline. Government cheese was more than just food. It was a symbol of survival during our grandparents' tough economic times. It was a legacy provided free of charge by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, in large unmarked cardboard boxes resembling surplus military rations. And inside was that solid orange brick. Government cheese was famous for its peculiar qualities: salty, stretchy, chewy, and most importantly, it could last in the refrigerator for up to 6 months without spoiling. Although it often didn't melt evenly and stuck to the pan, your grandma still struggled to cut a straight slice from this massive block of cheese. But nonetheless, this item was liquid gold when there was nothing else. Despite being provided free through national aid programs, its estimated market value was equivalent to about $1.50 to $2 per pound at the time. This was the main ingredient for grilled cheese with white bread and margarine, a basic but comforting meal that sometimes cost only about 10 cents. Furthermore, it helped stretch meals when the family lacked protein, making cheese macaroni. Meow Mix was the cheapest pet food available at the time, launched after 1974, and quickly became an alternative to more expensive brands like Purina, as its price was only half. It was mass-produced by utilizing meat byproducts, like offal and bone meal, to keep input costs as low as possible. A small 3-ounce can cost only about 19 to 25 cents, a very low expense, and your grandparents easily bought them 1 can at a time, prioritizing family food costs above all else. Your grandma bought it because it was canned in small sizes and easy to buy individually, prioritizing family food costs above all else. Sometimes, children would even mix in human cereal, like off-brand cereal, into the cat food to reduce the amount of cat food consumed, an act that demonstrates detailed calculation regarding provisions. Powdered milk was not a delicacy. For grandparents, it was hard household labor and a lesson in severe frugality. It had a characteristic chalky smell, a bland and challenging taste, and no matter how much you stirred until your wrist ached, those tiny lumps never completely disappeared. However, this item was extremely popular because a large bag cost about $1.29 at the time, equivalent to 1 gallon of fresh milk, and one package could last up to 2 to 3 weeks. Most importantly, powdered milk did not require refrigeration, making it easy for your grandparents to store and use during difficult times. Your grandma often mixed powdered milk at a 1-to-4 ratio, 1 part powder, 4 parts water, to try and extend its use time. This was a technique she often jokingly called "tastes better cold," to stop you from complaining. Powdered milk helped extend real milk when the family was lucky enough to acquire some, or it was mixed into porridge, mashed potatoes, and baked goods to add richness and calories. It was also used to make cream soup by mixing flour, powdered milk, and water to create a basic white sauce for other dishes. For grandparents, powdered milk was a survival solution through dry weeks, always reliable and necessary, often appearing in charity food boxes or stockpiled in the pantry. Canned Spam was meat that didn't need refrigeration, often found in your grandparents' pantry due to its economy and convenience. You opened the metal lid and took out a mysterious jelly-coated block, characterized by being salty and greasy. Although processed to the point where it almost squeaked, most importantly, it was still considered meat when other fresh meats were too expensive. A can of Spam cost about $1.09 to $1.39 in the 1970s. For your grandma, 1 can of Spam was enough for a week. They would slice it thin, fry it crispy, and call that the main dinner for the whole family. Spam's notable feature was its versatility. It easily paired with potatoes, rice, or noodles, becoming the main ingredient for Spam fried rice, Spam egg breakfast, or simply a Spam and mustard sandwich. During financially tight years, Spam was a pantry staple because it was cheap, long-lasting, and effective in providing calories and protein. It was something always available when there was no money to buy fresh beef or chicken, and in your grandparents' minds, Spam was meat, and that was enough to feed the family. Off-brand cereal in a bag was a testament to the pragmatism of the 70s because it had no cartoon mascots, no surprise toys, just a giant plastic bag full of crunchy shapes. This cereal was known for its slightly weird flavor and tendency to quickly turn soggy when diluted powdered milk was poured over it, but that wasn't an issue when cost was the top priority. Your grandma bought it because it lasted a week, and crucially, it was cheaper than a movie ticket. A detailed calculation of cost, value. A giant bag of this cereal cost only 29 to 45 cents, a huge bargain compared to branded cereal, and it was enough to feed the whole family for many breakfasts. In the 70s, buying off-brand cereal was smart and reasonable, not a source of shame as some people view cheap food today. Your grandparents even got creative by boiling cheap syrup and mixing it with the cereal to make giant bag cereal bars, or mixing it with peanuts and a few old candies to make a kid's snack mix. The biggest difference between then and now is that your grandparents always clipped the cereal bag shut with a clothespin and prayed it would stay fresh because no one dared to waste a single bit of cereal. If you find this journey back to the 70s fascinating, don't forget to click hype on the video so we can continue bringing back wonderful memories like these to the screen. Day-old bread was a true treasure hunt at discount bakeries. In the 1970s, your grandmothers often sought out discounted loaves, bruised rolls, or crumbled bagels. This item was sold at specialized stores at bargain prices where the smell of freshly baked bread still lingered, but the cost was much better. Your grandma could buy 5 loaves of bread for the price of just 1 brand new loaf, only 10 to 20 cents. This was truly an astonishingly low price compared to about $1.50 to $2 now. Additionally, grandmothers often bought large quantities, then froze them for gradual use. For instance, reheating them for sandwiches or turning them into other valuable ingredients. Nothing was wasted. Old bread was also used to make stuffing, croutons, and especially warm bread pudding by mixing it with eggs and powdered milk. Or they mixed breadcrumbs with eggs and onions to fry into breadcrumb patties, a cheap meat substitute. This is a perfect example of the thrift and recycling practiced by your grandparents' generation, who never threw food away. Boxed mac and cheese, especially the Kraft variety, wasn't just dinner. It was an indispensable budget strategy for American families in the 70s. This meal was created from a box of elbow pasta and a packet of neon orange cheese powder, capable of feeding the whole family for an extremely low cost. The box of mac and cheese cost less than $1, only 19 to 25 cents, making it one of the cheapest complete meals available at the time. According to instructions, the box served 4 people, but when times were tough, your grandma could stretch it into 6 servings by adding water or margarine instead of real milk and butter, because not every family had those ingredients. The point wasn't gourmet flavor, but ensuring everyone had a scoop of calorie-rich food to fill their stomachs. This dish was also customized by adding a can of tuna mac, or mixing it with canned green beans and cheese scraps to make mac casserole. In the 70s, mac and cheese was the entire main course, whereas today, it is often only considered a side dish or snack. Canned Vienna sausages were soft, salty, and slightly strange, but they were the shining stars of the pantry in the 70s. They were pale mini sausages soaked in a mysterious liquid, requiring no refrigeration for storage, turning them into the MVP, most valuable player, of every impoverished kitchen. Priced at just 19 to 23 cents a can, this was a cheap and convenient protein option, helping your grandparents get through weeks without fresh meat. Your grandparents often ate them cold straight from the can with crackers, or fried them up for breakfast when eggs and bacon were unavailable. These sausages were also transformed into Vienna hash by mixing them with potatoes and onions, a creative and nutritious meal. While you might feel a little nauseous eating them for the first time due to the soft texture and artificial flavor, when there was nothing else in the fridge, they were enough and a reliable source of calories. Their convenience and low cost were the reasons they existed, not because they were the best food. TV dinners were a revolutionary invention, a complete meal plan contained in a single compartmentalized aluminum tray. The meal usually included a piece of meat, such as Salisbury steak, a starch portion, mashed potatoes, some vegetables, corn, and a small dessert, brownie. Priced at just 59 to 89 cents per serving, it was a reasonable and quick solution for your grandparents' exhausted evenings. The only challenge for your grandma was having to bake it for 30 to 40 minutes, and you had to face the reality that the food was often lava hot on the outside, but sometimes still frozen inside. What was special was that this was one of the rare dinners you didn't have to share with your siblings, creating a real joy. During a time when the family dinners were the rule, the TV dinner was the exception. It was a way to feed everyone without mess or fuss, freeing your grandma from complex cooking. To stretch the meal, our grandmothers often added rice or instant mashed potatoes to the tray to increase the portion size and ensure everyone was full. Generic peanut butter was a severely economical choice, often featuring only a white label simply stating peanut butter without any promotional images or mascots. This was a gamble on quality because it often had oil floating on top and a thick, cement-like layer of dense peanuts settled at the bottom. Your grandma had to stir this peanut butter until her arms ached just to mix it evenly. That was a necessary step to achieve a consistent mixture. An 18-ounce jar of generic peanut butter was significantly cheaper than the name brand, only 39 to 59 cents, becoming the cheapest and longest-lasting calorie source in the pantry. Although it often tasted bland and sometimes bitter, this peanut butter held immense significance for our grandmothers. It could make sandwiches and keep the kids full for hours. It stuck to the roof of your mouth and stayed there, but it kept you full until dinner. For the grandparents' generation, the only thing that mattered was that it filled the sandwich with the necessary calories and protein for a long day. Your family ate every piece, never wasting even a bit, because it was food and the result of careful calculation. At just 5 cents a packet, equivalent to 30 to 40 cents today, Kool-Aid was the greatest gift in a kitchen lacking soda or juice. This tiny packet of dusty sugar contained dreams of a flavored drink. However, to make this drink, your grandparents needed to add 1 or 2 cups of sugar, or as they jokingly said, half a cup of sugar in a prayer if the family was broke. Kool-Aid had the power to stain clothes, lips, and countertops, but its artificial sweetness was still loved by children. For your grandma, this was a way to stretch 1 packet throughout the week by reducing the sugar amount by 50% or adding more water until no one noticed the drink fading. This item was also used to make poor man punch by mixing it with cheap soda, or poured into ice cube trays to create refreshing summer popsicles. In budget-constrained families, Kool-Aid was a great value. A 5-cent flavor brought great joy and helped grandparents feel that they could still provide something special for their children and grandchildren. When fresh fish fillets were too expensive and out of reach for many American families in the 1970s, frozen fish sticks became an effective alternative. They were neatly stacked like wood in a blue box covered in a layer of pale orange breading containing mystery meat from the sea. A box of fish sticks cost only about 39 to 59 cents, $4 to $6 today. Very cheap, frozen, and could last for months in your grandparents' tiny freezer. Mothers liked them for their convenience and low cost, while children liked them because they were an alternative to the rare chicken nuggets. Your grandparents usually baked or fried them, serving them as a simple main course. Fish sticks were also a main ingredient in fish stick casserole, a mixed stew along with peas and instant mashed potatoes. They provided necessary protein and gave your grandparents a comfortable seat at the dinner table, even if it wasn't a fancy meal. These fish sticks represented the pragmatism of the previous generation, seeking the most effective solution to ensure everyone had a full stomach, even if flavor wasn't the top priority. Canned ravioli or spaghetti, often the Chef Boyardee brand, was a combination of comfort and a symbol of poverty on the same plate, a true lifeline. Just open the can and heat it up, and you immediately had dinner, requiring no elaborate preparation. The sauce was usually overly sweet, the pasta soft, and the meat, if included, was considered excellent in the context of scarcity. A can of ravioli or spaghetti cost only 33 to 49 cents, $4 to $6 today, and sometimes you could buy 2 cans for under $1, which meant enough to feed all the kids. This item was a pantry staple when living on food stamps, because even if the pantry was empty, this dish made dinner easy and ensured everyone had food. This meal was also customized into ravioli toasty or spaghetti bake when mixed with cheese scraps and baked. It wasn't high nutrition or fancy, but for our grandparents' generation, it filled the gap and provided the necessary feeling of fullness. Store brand white bread was the glue in your grandparents' grocery list, a cheap, soft, fluffy food that was nearly impossible to keep its shape. Priced at just 19 to 25 cents a loaf, today $1.50 to $2.50, it was the most economical choice, providing about 50 slices of pure fluff enough for the whole week. Although no one from the grandparents' generation boasted about eating this kind of bread, no one wasted it either. Your grandma used it to make sandwiches, toasted it for breakfast, made French toast, and most importantly, used it to stretch every meal. For example, a slice of white bread spread with margarine and sprinkled with sugar became the delicious sugar toast. White bread was also used as the base for bread pizza by spreading ketchup and sprinkling government cheese scraps on top. In a decade where every dollar mattered and budget was the top priority, this type of bread was what your grandparents relied on to survive, the foundation of every packed lunch, clearly demonstrating maximum frugality. Instant mashed potatoes were considered a technological miracle in the 1970s, although they were often criticized for tasting like wallpaper paste. However, for your grandparents, this item was an undeniable convenience. Just add water, margarine, and stir, and you could feed the family in 5 minutes. Priced around 25 to 35 cents a box, today $2 to $3, they were much cheaper than buying a bag of real potatoes and having to peel them. Your grandparents often diluted these mashed potatoes and added a lot of salt until they had some acceptable flavor. In poor households, instant mashed potatoes were not a side dish or a shortcut, but the main event of the meal, often served with canned meat or sausages. This dish could be customized into potato pancakes or used as a topping for fake shepherd's pie. Instant mashed potatoes could sit on the shelf for months, always ready for emergency meals, providing reassurance to your grandparents that there was always starch in reserve. The grandparents' generation created countless wonderful dishes from these humble ingredients. If you still keep any items from the 1970s, tell me about your favorite childhood food. That's how we preserve these valuable memories together. Canned tuna packed in oil was a cheap, greasy, and fishy protein source, the standard of the 70s, whereas tuna packed in water was considered fancy. A can of tuna in oil cost about 29 to 39 cents, today $1.20 to $1.50, an excellent choice for a tight budget. The oil from the tuna can often leave slippery fingerprints on the kitchen counter and made sandwiches soggy, but your grandparents accepted that because this was cheap and readily available protein in the cupboard. The grandparents' generation survived on this tuna, turning it into hot grilled tuna melts, tuna casserole, or tuna patties. For families where fresh meat was rare, canned tuna was the closest thing your grandparents had to ensure basic nutrition, helping your family get through the hardest times without worrying about the meal lacking substance. Hot dogs and bologna, especially the discounted meat scraps, were the royalty of the bargain bin at the grocery store during your grandparents' time. Your grandma learned to ask for the ends, scraps, or oddly shaped pieces that the store couldn't sell at full price. These meat parts were extremely cheap, only about 10 to 20 cents a pound for the scraps, equivalent to about $2 per pound now. After buying them, your grandma would put them all in a skillet and fry them up. This meager cold cut was used for breakfast with eggs, made into hot dog hash, a sausage and potato mix, or most commonly, the fried bologna sandwich. Meat scraps were the secret weapon that helped your grandparents stretch meals. That's how the previous generation won the grocery game, through ingenuity, the ability to utilize, and never turning their nose up at any edible food part, a deep lesson in frugality that we rarely practice today. Early store-brand ramen noodles were not the trendy dish they are today, but emergency food and survival soup ready in under 5 minutes in the 70s. The packaging was extremely simple, only featuring the words chicken flavor and a packet of salty seasoning, with no eye-catching images or flowery advertisements. Very cheaply priced, only 10 to 15 cents a packet, sometimes nearly 30 cents, ramen was the instant solution when there was no time or money to prepare an elaborate meal. The seasoning was often intense and very salty, intended to conceal the fact that you had no real ingredients to add to the bowl of noodles. Your grandma often prepared this dish by adding eggs, egg drop ramen, or utilizing leftover vegetable scraps to make veggie scrap soup, turning it into a fuller meal. Today, ramen is elevated to a gourmet dish with complex ingredients. But back then, it was simply survival, the meal that ensured you wouldn't go hungry. Rice was the poor man's canvas in the 70s, a basic, cheap, versatile ingredient that filled half the plate and went with everything, from canned meat to pinto beans. Regular rice was usually very cheap, costing only about 15 to 25 cents a pound. Today, $1.10 to $1.50 per pound. Besides regular rice, minute rice, instant rice, was also very popular for its convenience, though more expensive, around 49 to 59 cents at the time, now $3 plus. For your grandparents, rice was a way to thoroughly utilize leftovers. Any remaining stew, sauce, or meat scraps were mixed with a large amount of rice, turning one leftover meal into 3 new meals. When the pantry was bare and there seemed to be nothing left to cook, your grandma always had a reliable bag of rice stored. The simplest dish was rice and beans. Your grandma never threw away a torn bag of rice because that bag of rice was dinner for the whole family. The appreciation and thorough utilization of rice clearly shows the difference between the thrift of the previous generation and our food waste today. Canned green beans were a familiar sight in the pantry of every poor family in the 70s, often criticized because they were mushy, salty, and rarely fresh green, usually leaning toward gray or dull brown. Although not visually or flavorfully appealing, they were extremely cheap, costing only about 15 to 25 cents a can, around $1 today. For your grandparents, this was the cheapest way to ensure vegetables were included in the meal. Your grandma often had to use salt, margarine, and a lot of hope to make them edible. Another saving strategy was using the leftover bean water in the can to season soup or rice, ensuring no component was wasted. Today, children often refuse canned vegetables, but in the 1970s, canned green beans were a part of survival. If these memories make you feel warm, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue preserving the stories that fed our generation together. Dry pinto beans were a core survival strategy for the grandparents' generation. This was an unbelievably cheap item, costing only about 9 to 12 cents a pound, around $1.50 to $2 today. This price allowed your grandparents to buy them in bulk to stockpile. Although preparing pinto beans required patience, picking out small stones, soaking overnight, and simmering all day, the final result was a pot of beans that could stretch a meal over 3 days. When fresh meat was expensive and protein sources were scarce, dry beans were not just cheap, but the most reliable and necessary source of protein. Our grandparents learned to live on beans and rice, making refried beans or ham-bone pinto soup. In the 1970s, Grandma often cooked a large batch of beans to eat over several days and froze the rest for the following week, showing detailed food planning. Margarine in a tub was butter's noisy, cheap cousin and an essential survival item in the 70s kitchen. It was bright yellow, had a faint but slightly odd buttery smell, and most importantly, its price was much cheaper than real butter. A tub of margarine cost only 25 to 39 cents, whereas today the price has risen to about $3 to $4. Margarine was used to replace real butter in every recipe, from spreading on bread, mashed potatoes, pasta, and corn, to cooking skillet cornbread. Grandma often considered it the necessary fat to add richness and flavor to humble meals. Especially, she reused the empty tubs for everything, from leftovers to holding pre-mixed Kool-Aid, turning them into a type of free Tupperware, demonstrating a spirit of thorough no-waste. Bulk oatmeal in cardboard canisters was a repeated breakfast item of the 70s. Cheap, hot, and exactly what was needed to start a long day and stay full. The tall, round oatmeal container seemed to have no expiration date and gave a sense of quiet strength regarding its long-term storage capability. A box of oatmeal cost about 39 to 49 cents, today $3 to $4. An extremely low cost relative to the amount of breakfast it provided. Grandma cooked oatmeal with water if the family was poor, or with diluted powdered milk if they were lucky enough to have a little extra. You knew you were poor when oatmeal was served at the table 5 days straight, but this dish ensured you were full enough to go to school or work. Oatmeal was also customized into oatmeal cakes, or mixed with generic peanut butter to create oatmeal peanut butter mix, adding protein and fat. This meal is an excellent example of how your grandparents prioritized fullness and energy over culinary variety. Canned evaporated milk was the substitute, the temporary solution, and sometimes the final solution for your grandparents' recipes, especially when fresh milk wasn't available. It was thick, pale, and poured out slowly, always ready when the refrigerator was empty. Priced at just 15 to 19 cents a can, evaporated milk was a cheap source of fat and creaminess, easy to stockpile in the pantry. Canned evaporated milk was the secret to making creamy scrambled eggs, delicious white sauces, evaporated milk gravy, and was the creaming agent for homemade mac and cheese. Especially, it was often an indispensable ingredient for making the best banana pudding your grandma ever made, providing a rich and sweet flavor. It was quietly essential, proving the resilience and creativity of the previous generation in turning the humblest ingredients into a full meal. These items were bought not because they were the tastiest, but because they were the reliable solutions that kept the whole family fed through tough times. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. And if you want to continue exploring the strange and fascinating past, check out the video, 20 Funny Things from the 1970s You'll Never Forget, where you'll revisit those quirky items that today only make us laugh.